But first, to something different this morning. You may have heard on Friday, a judge ruled that more than 4,000 surviving victims of the contaminated blood scandal of the 70s and 80s should receive £100,000 in compensation. You may remember at least 2,400 people died after contracting HIV or hepatitis C through NHS treatments. That was in the 70s and 80s. Well, among those campaigning for years for justice is Su Gorman from Tainted, whose husband Steve died in 2019 after coping with the effects of hepatitis C that he had contracted in this way. Sue joins us this morning. First of all, Sue, we are so deeply sorry for your loss. How are you?
Thank you. I'm fine. I mean, it's obviously not easy to live without him, and this compensation has lost most of its meaning. But yeah, I'm getting there.
Yeah. I suppose, as you say, the money can't even touch the sides of the grief that you are feeling. But does it at least make you feel that you've been heard, that, this scandal has been listened to and people are at least trying to make amends?
That's it. I mean, it is not going to replace what we've lost, particularly the bereaved. But it's still getting our heads around it. That all of a sudden, the government are actually taking what we would call the correct attitude towards us after years of saying there was no fault, there was no negligence. And even now at the inquiry, we're having witnesses still tell us that they did nothing wrong and there are no grounds to pay pay compensation. Yeah. There was no negligence. Although now the government seem to have changed their mind.
Indeed. Hence all of this compensation. If it's not too painful, Sue, do you mind reminding us what happened to your husband?
Yeah, Steve was he was a mild haemophiliac, so he didn't have serious bleeds, but he had a big bruise basically, and he went along as a 20-year-old student to Exeter Hospital and said, "Is there something you can do for this?" Yeah. And they said, "Oh, we've got this new wonderful stuff that will cure you." And they infected him on that day for one bruise with hepatitis C, and that was in 1976. He wasn't diagnosed until 1997. We knew something was wrong, but we never knew what.
Really?
And then when we were told, he was just told bluntly that what you've got to look forward to is cirrhosis, cancer, transplant, and premature death. What? And although he didn't have a transplant, that's pretty well what happened. And he got the treatment for hepatitis C in 2015, which eradicates it from the body. But his system was so badly damaged that it never recovered.
Doesn't seem fair, does it?
No, it doesn't. And like it was mostly men who were affected because haemophilia was basically something that affected male children. But most of them, they've had their lives totally knocked out of kilter because of this wonderful treatment that they were supposed to make their lives better, which does now. And that's the awful thing, is for the current generations of haemophiliacs, it is a wonder cure, it is a wonder drug, and it does allow them to lead normal lives. But because of the attitudes, shall we say, in the 70s and 80s towards providing it, we had this whole generation whose lives were just destroyed.
Indeed. And it matters. It matters for you. It matters for all the families. All those people are still suffering. But it matters for how we do things as well, doesn't it, going forward, that lessons are learnt?
Absolutely. And that's been one of the frightening things about the inquiry, is the number of people who are at some stage involved somehow in the decision-making, who don't accept that anything was wrong. And one of the attitudes is, we were much more paternalistic in the medical profession in those days. That was normal. But if there is a warning in a product, which there was, according to the licensing agreements, that it may contain the risk of an incurable potentially fatal illness, shouldn't the patients have been told? Shouldn't the parents of the children been given the chance to decide?
Of course. And are you sorry, carry on.
Sorry. And that is has been the battle. And the fact that they are still saying it suggests that they are not going to look too closely at the current situations.
Which actually answers the question I was going to interject with was, do you feel that lessons have been learned? Do you think that things have changed because of this?
I think when Sir Brian reports, I think there will be an effect. But, and as I say, the problem is that because all this happened 40 years ago, most of the witnesses that we hear are retired, defending themselves and entrenched in the thinking of their period. What has been quite shocking is the number who haven't bothered to inform themselves about the details of haemophilia. They saw in a document somewhere that some doctor said this, and they've just used it to ignore all the risks. And even if the medical errors happened, the way they've treated us since, pretending it didn't happen, pretending we were exaggerating, basically trying to protect the public purse by only paying us out of the health budget, which meant that it was deducted from other services, was unnecessary. And it made people feel second rate.
Has that changed now? You've been campaigning, of course, for some time over this. Does it feel like, obviously, a victory in that sense, that it's been worth it, that you know, this is headline news again?
Yes. I mean, what has been marvellous is the support of the press. And that is what helped us get the sea change back in 2017, was when we finally managed to convince good people that this really did happen, even though it was so awful. We weren't making it up or exaggerating. Yeah. And the support of the press has been absolutely vital. And I am very grateful again to you for covering the story this morning. If I could just say that the payments agreed are interim payments, and they are only to the people who are supported by the current support schemes, because administratively that's apparently simpler to do. Okay. So we are now wanting urgent payments for the bereaved parents and the bereaved children, who have been excluded at the moment, and that's causing quite a lot of distress. And it's not about the money. I mean, the money obviously isn't to be ignored. Sure. But when Brian made the announcement, we weren't sure whether he would include the bereaved partners, the widows. And when he did, I made me cry, because it's actually Steve, and his loss has been acknowledged. Exactly. And I think that is the important thing, that someone in authority actually acknowledges what our loved ones went through and what we went through losing them.
Exactly. You know, the pain's never going to go away, but at least they have, as you say, acknowledged it and tried to do something, however small. As you say, the money's not nothing, but it's something, isn't it? It's something to say this happened and this was dreadful. That's right. And it's an interim payment, and the full compensation will be assessed after the inquiry reports, but that's going to take 2 or 3 years. Right, okay. And the suggestion basically very sensibly was that there are people dying 1 every 4 days at the moment. Like Steve, they a lot have seen the opening of the inquiry, but haven't lived to see the end. And what the Sir Robert Francis, who proposed the compensation scheme, said was that it's important that people get money before they can't use it. And also another key thing has been that so many of the men, particularly who died, their last words have been, "Is the money sorted for my family?" There you go. That says it all, doesn't it? Listen,
that's right. And they shouldn't have had that on top of what was done to them.
No, it was horrendous enough. Listen, thank you so much, Sue, for talking to us this morning. We will keep you top of mind and come back again. As you say, you know, there's a lot more still to talk about and the inquiry, etc., etc. But listen, for now, just lots of love from us here at BBC Radio.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You take care. Thank you for talking to us this morning. Su Gorman then from Thanet, who, as you've heard, her husband Steve died in 2019 after coping with the effects of hepatitis C that he had contracted because of the contaminated blood scandal. Scandal, of course, very much the right way to talk about it, right? And that conversation hopefully forthcoming very, very soon.